Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 5, presented by Nicolet Law. He's John Kuhn, Packers legend. I'm Matt Schneidman of The Athletic.
Athletic legend.
Okay. John, this team never lacks excitement, never lacks relevance, never lacks entertainment. They always give us something to talk about. There hasn't been a tie in the NFL in each of the last 2 seasons, and we just all stayed up past our bedtime in Arlington, Texas, watching 2 professional football teams both score 40 points, and then be told the game is over. What a game that was. We got a lot to get to today.
We do have a lot to get into, but it's funny. We just got done 2 weeks ago watching a defensive battle where most people were appalled and disgusted by watching 2 incredible defenses duel it out for 60 minutes. And this time we got the exact opposite. We got 2 quarterbacks playing at an incredible level. And with wide receivers making plays out the wazoo. It was a fantastic game to watch. I enjoyed being on the sideline. The atmosphere was incredible. And, it just sucks that it ends in a tie. I don't like the tie rule, but it is what it is. And that's what we got now.
I want to start big picture, then go more granular with stuff from the game that we can talk about. So I'll pose this question to you and I'll let you answer first. Big picture, how much differently, if at all, do you feel about the Packers and what they can accomplish this season than you did 2 weeks ago when they were 2-0? Or is it still too early to make any grand declarations about this team?
No, I think when you ask the question, what can they accomplish? I think they can accomplish everything that I thought they could accomplish just 2 weeks ago. I think it's all right there in front of them. And we've seen the ceiling that this defense has, the ceiling that the offense has. Unfortunately, we haven't seen them put it all together. And there's a few plays, just a few, in this very short season that could have the Packers sitting at 4-0 very easily with people talking about their great dominance. And in fact, even had they won last week at a score of 10-3, and then won this week at a score of 40-37, just by doing simple things and not letting kicks get blocked or not turning the ball over in your own zone, just very simple things could have this Packers team sitting undefeated. So I recognize what they can do, but what they will do is a different story. And it all depends on whether they learn from their mistakes that we are seeing early on in the season.
Yeah, the NFL is such a fickle business, right? You can be on top of the mountain, number 1 in the Athletics power rankings after 2 weeks, and now all of a sudden you look like a fringe playoff team once again. Right now, if the season were to end today, which obviously it doesn't as we record this around 6:40 p.m. Central Time on Monday, September 29th, Packers are the 7 seed again. Just like they have been each of the last 2 seasons. Life goes round and round, and the Packers are always the 7 seed. But in all seriousness, I think my gut reaction is to say, oh, they're not the Super Bowl contender we thought they were. But seeing how they went from, top of the mountain, like I said, to where they are now, they could easily get back there. What if they come back from the bye, blow out the Bengals, go to Arizona, beat the Cardinals, beat the Steelers, beat the Panthers, maybe beat the Eagles, like that, then all of a sudden we're having a completely different conversation. As I've said many times, that's the beauty of the NFL and the beauty in the fact that there is a week-to-week appetite for these overreactions, analysis, whatever you want to call it. I still think the Packers are a very good football team. Can be a very good football team. They haven't played like it the last 2 weeks, complimentary football-wise. Like you said, last week against the Browns, lights out defense. This week against the Cowboys, Swiss cheese defense, great offense. The makings for a great team are there. They just got to put it together. They're 2-1-1. They don't have a losing record. They just have to, get some time to do that. Would you like for them to have already done that? Of course. But that's not always how the NFL works out. A lot of season left. All right.
I think when you look at it, Matt, there's something to really remember here. The defense, we've seen the ceiling. We've talked about how great they can be. We talk about the pressure that they can put on and how they have playmakers at all 3 levels. And quite frankly, after watching this past game, you understand they're not the 85 Bears and they're not the 2000 Baltimore Ravens where they're just going to win you games just because they march out on the football field, right? They're going to give you the opportunity to win football games. But Jordan Love is going to have to make some plays. He is going to have to show up and the offense is going to have to pick their lunch pail up and win football games when the defense has a down day. Conversely, the defense is going to have to do the same for the offense. And for the last 2 weeks, we haven't seen that happen. So that's where this team doesn't have to play perfect to win, but they have to play on the one side of the ball good enough to pick the other up when it doesn't have its best day.
And that's what Micah Parsons said after the game last night at the podium. He said he told Jordan Love, basically, thank you for having our back. The defense had the offense's back last week. Offense had the defense's back this week. Like I said, they just got to put it all together as one, or more like they did in the first 2 games. All right. I have a couple things written down for all 3 phases. Let's start with defense first. And I'm not going to go through all of these all at once. I want to, stick on defense for a little bit here. The question is what happened, because the first 3 weeks, they're the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL. Then they give up 40 points yesterday. Granted, not all of those were on a full field. For example, you have the end of the first half where Jordan Love loses the fumble deep in his own territory, and the Cowboys score on I think it was a 15-yard touchdown to George Pickens. A couple things stood out to me. They didn't tackle as well. Specifically, Edgerrin Cooper missed a couple tackles. Carrington Valentine slipped on the turf on that late George Pickens touchdown. The tackling was not good enough. This is more of a granular one, not a theme. On the deep one to Tolbert in overtime, Keyshawn Nixon just gave up. I think he thought that ball was going out of bounds. I think he thought Dak was throwing it away once he was flushed out of the pocket, but it was not, obviously. So it's completed to Tolbert for 35 yards to, I believe, the 4-yard line. And I'm not saying, Keyshawn played terribly. I don't think he did. But it's plays like that where the Packers, if they want to be a Super Bowl contending team, they can't have those lapses. And I understand I probably shouldn't say, Keyshawn Nixon thought it was going out of bounds and gave up. That means some big picture thing about this defense. But my point is, they're making too many of those head scratching mistakes in all 3 phases for them to be a team that can legitimately go far in the playoffs if they're still doing this at the end of the year. I think the pass rush was an interesting thing yesterday because the numbers say the Packers pressured the Cowboys on, I believe, 14 out of 40 dropbacks that Dak Prescott had. That pressure percentage is around 35. I think it's exactly 35. That would have placed them 15th in the league in team pressure percentage last year. But Micah Parsons said after the game he thought the pressures were getting home all night. That wasn't the case. But as Baldy did in a film review today, I think the Packers were getting pressure, but the Cowboys did an even better job of neutralizing that pass rush, neutralizing that pressure by getting rid of the ball quickly and by double teaming Micah Parsons and chipping him and all sorts of stuff. And the Cowboys, even though they were without CeeDee Lamb, had a great game plan so that those pressures in that pass rush didn't have enough time to wreck the game. So those are my quick thoughts on why the Packers defense didn't play all that well yesterday. Actually, not well at all. What did you see from the defense yesterday, John?
I actually thought the defense played really well in the first half for the first 29 and a half minutes. They did. They were still the leading defense in the National Football League. They didn't didn't give up a point in the first 29 and a half minutes. They were doing their job. And it was that second to last drive by the Dallas Cowboys when Dak Prescott went 7 for 7, marched them right down the field and scored a rushing touchdown. And quite frankly, what did I see on that drive? I saw exactly that. Pressure negating play calls. And what I mean by that is they called some screens, right? Screens are a great thing to call against defenses that are rushing the quarterback. It gets them to slow down, gets them to think, gets them backtracking, and it tires them down. Then I saw some 7-man protections where multiple times on that drive, I saw 7 men, meaning only 3 guys are going out on a route. I saw that more than once on that singular drive. So they took an effort on one drive to get Dak Prescott in a rhythm and to get him throwing the football without feeling people bearing down on him. Micah Parsons got a huge shot on Dak Prescott early in the game. So did Edgerrin Cooper. Both of them put the pain into a hit after Dak Prescott got rid of the football. So what do? You make it so Dak doesn't feel that. The Cowboys did that, and Dak played phenomenal. You talk about that play with Keyshawn Nixon giving up on it. Yeah, he might have gave up on it, but the Dallas Cowboys made an outstanding play, right? Dak Prescott's throw was absolutely absurd. Put it in only a spot where the receiver could catch it, and the receiver toe tap caught the ball. He also made a throw late in the third quarter, and I remember this vividly. The Cowboys had only completed 1 third down. only got 1 first down on all of their third downs to this point in time in the ball game. It's 3rd and 6. The Packers bring a blitz. They're going to get home. The timing's disrupted. And Dak Prescott, instead of trying to finish his timing with his drop and fire a bullet, he threw a lollipop out to the sideline and put it right where the receiver ended up being. The receiver hadn't even come out of the break yet, and he put it right there. Dak Prescott played phenomenal. And they say you can't play defense against a perfectly thrown ball. There was multiple times where Dak Prescott threw a perfectly thrown ball in that football game.
That's what Micah Parsons basically said. After the game, he said, we were fine up front, but Dak was just better. And I kind of agree with that. It was hard to beat Dak Prescott on that night, even if he didn't have CeeDee Lamb, which, going into the game, you thought, the Packers should shut this team down. But I didn't think Nate Hobbs played particularly well. And then he went out and I believe was in concussion protocol. Matt LaFleur didn't talk today like he normally does on Mondays because of how late you guys got in early this morning, I guess. So he will be talking, if you're listening to this on Tuesday morning, he's talking Tuesday today at 2 p.m. So we'll see what the deal is with guys like Nate Hobbs, Devontae Wyatt. I think that's a notable one because Wyatt goes out with a knee injury. I forget when exactly he left the game, but Parsons was asked after the game why the defense just fell apart. And the first name he said was Devontae Wyatt. He goes, Devontae Wyatt doesn't get enough love. I'm paraphrasing here. He goes, he's a very important player to this team. When you lose a player like that, it stings. So look, the Packers were great defending the run early this season. They got gashed a couple times yesterday. I think they let up like 4.7 yards per carry, 116 yards on 20-something rushes, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. They still can't really force turnovers or really come close. There's a couple bang plays that they're just a hair too slow on, like the ball to Pickens down the left side.
Matt, do you remember training camp? Do you remember training camp? Do you remember the theme of training camp?
Yeah, punch at the ball. And they're
I
see them still doing that, but it's just not working.
It's just, and it's not that it's not working. It's that other teams are doing a good job of protecting the football. And when a couple of these punches, when a couple of these swipes, when they actually work, when the ball does get there on the ground, and I'm sure it's going to happen at some point in time, it's going to happen in bunches. And that's when we're going to see the explosive nature of this defense rather than just the fast physicality of this defense. One last point I want to make is our defense had played so well through the vast majority of the season in the first half of this football game. They were hardly on the field for drives that were sustained, right? Detroit sustained some drives against us, but they held firm in their end and forced them to a couple field goals. When this game wore on and the drives were going 10, 11, 12, 9, this Packers defense got tired because they haven't been pressured like that yet. They haven't been forced to go that many plays. And when their defense got tired, it took away from the team speed, and that's when you saw a lot of the missed tackles.
Yeah, and what I was saying just then is that, on some plays, they were just a hair too slow, like the deep ball to Pickens down the left side. I forget at what point in the game it was, but Nate Hobbs has pretty good coverage, kind of just mistimes his jump. And from where I was sitting, you could see Evan Williams ranging over, and you thought, he's going to light this guy up. But Evan Williams kind of, goes, I don't want to say half-ass into it because he didn't, but he's just a hair too slow from breaking that up, and Pickens makes an incredible catch. He had a great game yesterday. I think yesterday, like the offense's performance, I would say was a fluke in the Browns game and more of an outlier than the start of a concerning trend. I would say the same thing for the Packers defense. They need to start taking the ball away, though. We'll save that discussion for another date. I want to touch on the offense quickly before we get into a whole nother discussion next segment about special teams. Offense was great. That is the performance you wanted to see from the Green Bay Packers offense coming off of that Cleveland game. The pass protection wasn't great. PFF, I think, had Sean Ryan and Jordan Morgan allowing 4 pressures each, Rasheed Walker and Darian Kennard allowing 5 each, Elton Jenkins allowing none in 51 pass blocking snaps. But Jordan Love still threw, for well over 300 yards, 31 for 43, 3 touchdowns. He wasn't great under pressure. I think 6 for 16 for 47 yards or something like that. Paled in comparison to Dak's numbers under pressure. Those were phenomenal. But I think Jordan Love played really well. Obviously, the fumble at the end of the first half, you would obviously like to have back. We can talk about that discussion to go aggressive there instead of just take the ball into half. But I thought Jordan Love played really well. The other thing I think that was important yesterday is they finally got the running game going. It took a little while. They didn't start the game, pounding the rock well and getting these explosive runs. But as they wore the Cowboys down, and, just thinking back on it, they weren't run straight up the gut. They had to work the edges a little bit. Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson both broke a couple. Jacobs got busy in the open field. They ended up, I believe, with 4.7 yards per carry, 160 something rush yards. That is the game they needed to at least put on tape for other teams. Okay, you got to respect the run more. And then obviously they were able to hit some throws over the top. So that complementary offensive game that we've been looking for from the Packers the last couple of weeks, we saw it last night. So that's the silver lining. They didn't lose. Let's not forget that. They did not lose that football game.
How do you look at ties? How do you see a tie? Do you see it as a good thing? Do you see it as a bad thing?
It's kind of in the
how do
middle.
you see a tie?
It's the cop-out answer that guys were giving last night is there's the silver lining that it's not a loss. You're still over 500. But especially in a game like that, you blew another double-digit lead. It's another game in the last couple seasons of Packers shooting themselves in the foot where you said, okay, if we didn't do that or that easily avoidable mistake, the block field goal or the block PAT, which we'll get into, you really thought that they should have won that game. So I'm sure it leaves a bitter taste in their mouth, a sour taste, and rightfully so, but it's still worth acknowledging that it's not a loss.
See, I think when you look at it, psychologically, it's a loss to the Packers. It's a win for the Cowboys, right? You got two teams that are playing each other with about a spread of 7 points. Yeah, that's a significant underdog versus a significant favorite, and the favorite feels like they gave away a win, and the underdog looks like, hey, we battled with one of the better teams in the NFC. We that's a win for us. So I think psychologically, that's the type of thing that can lift a team, and it's the type of team that can, hurt a team going forward because they say, man, we let another one slip away. So psychologically, I wouldn't say it's not a win, it's not a loss. I think it's definitely a loss for the Packers psychologically, but when you talk about what buys actually or what losses actually do, when you look at the long-term ramifications, it's much better in terms of normally a tie ends up in the favor of a team with tiebreaker scenarios.
For sure. So Packers obviously on their bye week. We'll touch later in the show on what they need to self-scout this week. John, I want to get your thoughts later in the show on what a bye week is actually like for the players. We already have some video on social media of what one of their prominent players is up to this week. But after the break, we're going to talk about what the Packers need to improve upon most. And the most consistent deficiency, in my mind, is a unit that Rich Bisaccia leads. His name is hot in the streets on Twitter. We're going to tackle that discussion right after the break here on the Tundra, presented by Nicolet Law. This episode of the Tundra podcast is brought to you by Nicolet Law. Since 2007, Nicolet Law has been representing injured folks in Wisconsin.
And listen, you could be driving from a tailgate or trying to brave those highways during the snow. Accidents, they still happen. And when they do, you deserve a team that knows your story and your state. At Nicolet Law, they're more than attorneys. They're your neighbors. They're our neighbors, and they fight to get you back on your feet.
So if life takes an unexpected turn, call Nicolet Law at 1-855-NICOLET or visit nicoletlaw.com. That's 1-855-NICOLET or visit nicoletlaw.com. They're proud to stand up for the Midwest, one case at a time. Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 5, presented by Nicolet Law. And John, before we offer some levity to this podcast, I want to get serious for a minute. What in the name happened at the end of that overtime period when the Packers almost threw the game away? Well, we know what happened because we talked to Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love after the game. Here's the long and short of it, the Cliff Notes version. First of all, people were wondering, why weren't you going faster? Why weren't you trying to score a touchdown quicker? Well, if you do go fast and somehow the drive ends in a field goal, you leave too much time on the clock for the Cowboys to potentially go win the game with a field goal. So I was fine with the pace at which they went. I was even fine if I'm a Packer fan with the screen to Golden. Romeo Doubs just didn't block Trayvon Diggs.
No.
And then after that is where it got a little dicey. So they had a shot into the end zone called, a double move on Diggs, because LaFleur said they wanted to play off that screen to Golden. They wanted to get Diggs to fire up again and hit him over the top with a touchdown. The Cowboys played cover 2. They had that over-the-top look smothered. So Jordan Love checked it down to Emmanuel Wilson, who tries to make a guy miss. And Jordan Love said that basically they have an on-the-ball call. Ozone, which you know what that is, but I learned what that means for the first time last night. Ozone, for those who don't know, means throw it in the end zone or throw it out of bounds. And for some reason that still is unbeknownst to me, not everyone was on the same page about that. Jordan Love said the team knew they were going to run an ozone call on the ball.
Are you surprised by that? Are you surprised by that?
I am. Because
how are you surprised by that? This is the crux of the NFL. Okay, this is what people don't understand.
Hold on.
Everybody's saying,
let me finish. Then you can go. So basically, I just want to paint the picture for anyone who didn't read my story or doesn't know the full context behind what happened at the end of the game.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody that's
they,
watching this knows exactly what happened at the end of that game.
They know what happened, but they may not know like the context of why it happened. So basically, Jordan Love said that everyone knew they were going to have an ozone call if someone was tackled in bounds, like Emmanuel Wilson was. So like I said, ozone, throw it to the end zone, throw it out of bounds. Instead, they mosey up to the line. You see Wicks and Golden throw their hands up like they don't know what's going on. And then the clock's ticking down and you're like, oh my God, they're not going to have enough time to get this off. They throw it to Golden in the back of the end zone, kind of a scrambled play and incomplete with 1 second left. Chris Collinsworth lays into them on the broadcast. Yeah, they are lucky there was only 1 second left. They literally threw that game away.
Yeah.
Am I surprised? Yes, because this is supposed to be, and I'll tell you why very briefly and then give you the floor.
Okay.
Matt LaFleur, I think, is one of the better offensive coaches in the league. Jordan Love and this offense are supposed to be one of the best offense. How are you, as a professional football offense, not situationally aware that you need to get up to the line fast? You know how much time is left on the clock. LaFleur, this wasn't a joke, but I don't think it was rooted in complete seriousness. He goes, I don't know if our guys just didn't know it was a 2-minute situation. Like, how does that happen, John Kuhn? That was brief.
Because they're human beings. Okay. And
being paid millions of dollars to not make those mistakes.
You're exactly right. I'm going to say the same thing you are. You're getting paid millions. You should know exactly what to do. And you should do it a million times at practice. And you should be coached it to exhaustion. And guess what? They are coached it to exhaustion. They do it a million times at practice. Some guys choke when they get out there and they forget what the hell they're supposed to do. I.e. Brandon Bostic in the 2014 NFC Championship game. He was told that a million times what to do. And he knows it. Okay. And he had an out-of-body experience. It happens. But there is an accountability, not just on the players to make sure they do it, but the coaches to hold them accountable as well. We've seen situations like this quite a bit more times than we should of. We need to know every game. That's what Aaron Rodgers was incredible at. Incredible. He knew the game situation to the T, and he made sure that everybody knew the game situation to the T. And if they didn't, he made them right. And if they and if he couldn't, he reamed them out. And he got bad body language, bad leader, this, that, and the other thing. This is a problem. To me, that's the serious problem of it all. If you tell me you wanted to waste all the time on the clock, I don't like that philosophy either. Be aggressive, go score the touchdown. And if you have to kick the field goal, then you count on your defense to keep them out of Brandon Aubrey's way. It's hard in Brandon Aubrey's way. It's difficult, but this game can only be played one way. You cannot waver back and forth on, I'm going to be conservative and waste clock, or I'm going to be aggressive and go for it with 30 seconds left at the end of the first half. You have to have a conviction with what you're doing. And it's hard for Matt LaFleur to be convicted, because can you be convicted if you can't trust that the guys know the situation? That was baffling to me, because I know these players are way better than that. And I know these players know what they're supposed to do. And yet they went out there and they looked like they didn't know what to do. Here's the other thing too. The little toss to Emmanuel Wilson, that one probably should have been thrown in the dirt, or it probably should have been chucked over the head. That one probably should have been just thrown away when it wasn't available, because you just used your last time out. Ozone's coming up. Ozone is that's a mayday. That is a button to push in case of emergency. You don't ever want to call ozone. Ozone happens more times than not after a sack, right? You're on the 7-yard line. They trip you up. You fall down. You got the football. Ozone. That's a mayday. That's not a, hey, we went to this play that should have never happened. They shouldn't have been in that situation.
Just poor management. And like I said, they're fortunate it didn't cost them at
Matt,
least a tie.
This is dead serious. Like, coaches wrestle with this equation all the time of how much am I coaching these guys to do the right thing, and how much can they handle versus the players also being put in spots to succeed, right? You can't put so much on their plate, especially young guys, that they might not be able to handle all the situations, and yet you want to believe that they can do it. It's a very difficult balance. And the best teams have a cohesiveness where they all know what's going on at the same time, and they all are thinking the same thing. And it's clear that this Green Bay Packer team does not have that connection yet. So how does that change? That's the question. How does it change? And it changes with accountability. Who's going to hold who accountable? Do the players, do they hold themselves accountable? I believe that this team is player-driven. It's player-led on the accountability side. So to that extent, one of the players is going to have to, pick up the slack in the accountability area. If not, Matt LaFleur is going to have to do something about it.
I'm going to read this quote from Micah Parsons post-game yesterday. He said, "I'm not even pointing fingers talking about how many points they gave up on defense. We got to find a way to get off the field, and we didn't do a great job at that tonight. And I take ownership. Coach in there took ownership. But ownership is one thing. Doing something about it is another. Let's all watch this film as a team. Let's break it down. Let's talk about it. I think that's the tough conversations that we need to have all together. Fans are getting sick and tired of Matt LaFleur saying it starts with me." That's what he's going to say. He doesn't say that to brush off blame and then not do anything about it during the week. But I do understand why fans are getting upset just hearing that over and over again.
Yeah. So the deal is it does start with him, right? It always starts with Matt LaFleur. It always starts with the messaging. But we've heard that for a very long time now. So what you're starting with is still not sinking in. It's still not working. Now, they did manage to squeeze out a draw here in this game. They did get the tie. So it's not the end of the world. But these are situations that will come up again and again throughout the course of the season. Game management situations at the most critical points. That's what these games always boil down to. And it's baffling because how often do you watch a 2-minute drill practice? Every single day. Yep. You've watched multiple 2-minute drills during the training camps. Multiples. And the fact that it looked like they were lollygagging out there, getting ready to try and win the football game. It was just shocking to me.
All right. I think the hot topic in the streets that everyone's talking about is special teams. When we talk about where this team needs to improve most, the offense has been inconsistent. The defense, obviously, after last night, you can say has been inconsistent as well. The constant, and it hasn't been a good constant, has been Rich Bisaccia's special teams. Now, a lot of people calling for his job. I'm not going to sit here and say they should fire him or they should keep him. That's not up for me to decide. Have I done that before? Sometimes with other guys, but I don't know that we're at a breaking point right now where we should state a case one way or the other. What we do know is, you talked about Rick Gosselin's rankings last week on last week's show. He doesn't do those anymore, but in Bisaccia's first 2 years with the Packers.
But if he did.
22nd and 29th. Last year, I think Gosselin didn't do the rankings. They were 15th in FTN's DVOA, which also measures kind of the overall success of the entire special team. So middle of the pack. This year, I don't know what they're ranked, but the eye test.
Well, they were 26th. They were 26th on the kickoff team coming into the game, and they didn't do themselves any favors in this last one.
Right. What we know from the eye test is that they've given up a couple long returns, gave up another one last night, have had a couple field goals blocked, questionable decisions on punt return, questionable kick return strategy. It's not great. What I want to touch on first is the blocks. Last week, it was not so much a missed assignment from Jordan Morgan as it was just being overpowered physically. This week, it was more of a mental thing with Luke Musgrave. Would you agree? How he took the guy on the wing instead of the guy inside? And I'm no special teams ace like you are, John Kuhn, but
So
you should be more worried about the guy who has a shorter path to the kicker, correct?
It's a chain link fence all across that field goal team, right? And you got to look. It was Banks, right? It was Banks that was playing tight end, correct?
Against the Browns?
No, this past game.
Banks didn't play last game.
Brant Banks. It was Brant Banks.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
It was Banks playing tight.
Banks. Yeah.
No. It was Brant Banks. He's brand new. He's new to that spot. So Luke's got to know, is his foot, does it go out as far as the last tight end that was here? Do we have the same distance from the ball that we've always had? Is his body going to be as big? Is there going to be a hole here? Because you got to try and have presence on the player coming on the edge too, but you always secure the inside. You always secure the inside first. And if somebody runs the hump on you, then they run the hump on you. And that's the worst case scenario. So yes, Luke was the last man in that chain link fence. He couldn't make it right. But they had a different piece in there. To me, here's the whole thing with special teams. I know Rich Bisaccia coaches this upright. He is not telling these guys the wrong thing to do. They are not goofing off on a regular basis. But do you practice live, full go, field goal blocks? No, you don't. Not in Green Bay. I've never seen one. So when these guys are being told these things, and then the first time they try it, it's in a football game going against live bullets, it gets dicey. Until you know these guys. I mean, you might have to go live on some field goal blocks until your field goal team can prove that they can withstand that surge for a couple plays, or at least go semi-live or something to that nature, so that you don't allow these things to happen. And that's just the start of special teams, because there's other areas that are also questionable.
One of those questionable areas, and you and I talked about this after the game in the tunnel, is the kick return strategy. Now, again, I'm not sitting here saying Rich Bisaccia is not coaching these guys, but from an outsider's perspective, it's at least worth questioning why, when the ball bounces in the landing zone and then Savion Williams kneels it in the end zone for a touchback, you get the ball at the 20 there. It's not the same as if the ball just flies into the end zone and you take a touchback and you get it.
Phenomenal new rule by the NFL to do that whole change up, down it after it lands in the landing zone. You get it at the 20, kick it into the end zone, down it, you get it at the 35. It's a phenomenal rule. It's got the playback going again, and I love it. It's tremendous.
Why though? And maybe try and put your coach's cap on here. Is Savion Williams not being instructed or not doing it? Because Savion Williams, it wasn't just one time. It wasn't just a mental fart. He's clearly being told 3 times not to take the ball out if it bounces in the landing zone.
Wrong. He's being told to bring that ball out.
So why isn't he doing it 3 times? Is he just severely uncoachable? Because then you get the ball at the 20 instead of, odds are he's going to return that ball past the 20, even if it bounces and then he catches it in the end zone.
He's a rookie. He's uncomfortable in that moment. And maybe he doesn't feel uncomfortable, but knowing exactly what to do instantaneously and doing it is different from being able to sit in a meeting room and say, yeah, I'm supposed to return that. Yeah, I'm supposed to return that. That ball was coming down. Brandon Aubrey has a really nice, aside from the biggest leg in the National Football League, he's got a really nice corkscrew kind of kick that almost spins sideways and knuckleballish to the returners. That's an uncommon kick that you see around the NFL. And because of that, I think it made them uncomfortable to run up and try and catch this football. And so the safe thing is to let it bounce, and it takes a big bounce. And then by the time, and they can take off as soon as that ball bounces in the landing zone. So now the kickoff team gets a jump start on you, and you're trying to be careful and make sure you don't get tackled inside the 20. The problem with that is you're probably not going to get tackled inside the 20 regardless. So you got to just start bringing them out so you can get used to it. But I know for a fact that he's told to bring that ball out when it lands in the zone, unless it takes a weird squirrely bounce and bobbles around, or you muff it, or you have trouble fielding it. I know that. I know it.
And there was at least one instance where it did take a little bit of a squirrely bounce and he didn't field it cleanly. But here's my thing. Look, I get he's a rookie. I get it's Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys. But if by the third time or by even the second time, if you don't have a kick returner who can follow that simple instruction, then you need to get a new one. They replaced Matthew Golden on punt return last night because he still can't show the adequate decision-making needed. And he's going to get himself freaking killed out there. He almost did last night. So they took him off.
It's a scary game. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for those that are willing to say, it's not for those that are willing to say, hey, you had 3 tries, you can't do it. No, they're going to roll with Savion Williams because he's an exceptional talent, and they should roll with him, right? And these are growing pains that you're dealing with young players.
But they showed their willingness to I don't think it's a permanent change, but it's like what they did a couple of years ago when they had Jaden Reed on punt return and they put Randall Cobb back there on the goal line to just make a safe decision. They did that with Dobbs instead of Golden. But Golden has returned, goal line-ish punts this season. So they showed a willingness last night to make that change in game. Why they didn't do that on kick return if Savion Williams isn't going to listen to Rich Bisaccia, I don't know.
They might eventually, but it's a lot more high pressure.
Bottom line, that needs to change.
Okay, it does. He needs to return it.
You're sacrificing valuable field position by not following a coach's instructions.
I bet you he will start returning them more often because it's
it would have been nice for the Packers if he started yesterday, so they didn't have to start these critical drives on their own 20.
You know what? 2010, or no, what was it? Yeah, it was 2010. We're playing the Miami Dolphins at home. And we're marching down the field, and Cameron Wake's outside, and we had this call where the line could change the call if they thought middle dog was coming, so they could protect it inside a little bit firmer. And the line was like leaning towards making that call, make our jobs easier, protect the middle. Well, the problem was it kept leaving the backs on Cameron Wake on the outside, and we got in a conversation on the sidelines, and we were basically arguing. You're leaving us on Cameron Wake because you're making this call. You think they're coming in the middle. They're not coming in the middle. They're showing they're coming in the middle to get you to make this call. You're leaving the backs on Cameron Wake. This is stupid, right? And we ended up losing that ball game. And this is the Super Bowl year, a very important ball game. And we learned after that game, we got to be clearer about how we make these checks. It was a growing pain. We even lost the football game, but we got better because of it as a young team, as a young offensive line, as young running backs, being able to handle exactly seeing the same thing and making the right call or potentially overriding calls. So this is a situation very similar where Savion Williams is either going to change the way that he catches and returns the football, or they will make a change for him. I don't think that will happen because he's such a talent, such a physical talent.
All right, let's wrap up that discussion. After the break, what goes into the bye week and what should the Packers be focusing on when they self-scout? We'll get some insight from a guy who's gone through a bye week or two in his day. Stick with us. This is the Tundra. Welcome back to the Tundra. This segment is brought to you by Potawatomi Sportsbook. Folks, it's football season. We all know how much you love betting on it, almost as much as we love watching it. There's one sportsbook that's become the best in the Midwest. That's right. That's Potawatomi Sportsbook. You know who it is. It's the home of big wins, bold flavors, a bump in atmosphere, a big you-know-what screen, and more. Catch a game at the bar or reserve your spot in the middle of all the action for big events. In fact, you can bet on any sport, anytime. Bet above the rest at Potawatomi Sportsbook. John, you have food at Potawatomi Sportsbook, custom made in your name. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. It's a phenomenal place. And it's a phenomenal platter, the fullback platter, going for a $30 price tag. I guarantee you won't be able to eat it all, Matt. You won't be able to put it all down. In fact, that's $30, but that's better than going to Qdoba because you'll be able to bring it home and get yourself 3 meals in that.
Okay, fair enough. You know what I'm looking at Potawatomi Sportsbook? The odds for the Yankees-Red Sox playoff series. By the time you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen, I will be on a plane to Newark Airport tomorrow. Packers bye week. Huh?
Nobody
Who
cares.
Nobody cares? Nobody cares about your, I'm not going to say that.
This is exciting. This is exciting. Playoff baseball.
Yankees Red Sox playoff baseball. I was trying to plug the odds for our sponsor, and you're saying nobody cares. Yankees are minus 195 to win the series. Not great odds, but they're going to beat the Red Sox in this best of 3. But sure, John, nobody cares. Why don't you say that to Potawatomi's face? The great sponsor and sportsbook we have.
This is why nobody cares, because the Brewers don't have to play to pop their bottles for the wild card round. They are already in with the best record in baseball. I just wanted to talk some smack.
All right, let's get back to the Packers. John, take us inside a player's mind during a bye week. Packers have the bye week. Obviously, no game, not action-packed with maybe the storylines of a typical game week, but what does a player, and I'm sure it varies, typically do on a bye week in terms of getting away, staying at the facility, self-scouting? How does it all go down?
Well, it depends on where you're at personally, and with your physical, with your mental, and with your emotional, right? If you're nicked up, you got to stay around. You got to get better. And there's a number of Green Bay Packers that are going to be sticking around the facility, sticking around in Green Bay, doing treatment and trying to get better and get back for this football season. I don't know how many of them will be able to get back right after the bye, but they're going to be able to get a lot of work in over the next 2 weeks to try and ensure that they're close to coming back, if not coming back, by the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's first and foremost. If you're a guy that's injured, you're doing that. If you're a guy that's not injured, you will definitely still work the first few days this week, but you'll probably have a nice long weekend and be able to enjoy yourself, enjoy your family, maybe take a trip somewhere, get out of town, get your mind off of it. We took a couple trips during bye weeks that were nice. Whether it was to Chicago or one time we went to Turks and Caicos, just to get away for a couple days before we came back for the real long run of the season. And this is the earliest the Packers have had a bye in a long time, right? If you think about it, the Packers have been having byes in November, in December, and it was always go. You just had a long start to the season. Go get away, refresh, and come back recharged for a end of season playoff run. That's a weird thing to do this early in the season, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you come back, you're going to have 13 straight weeks of football. No interruptions, no break, a little mini break after that Thursday Thanksgiving game. But it's a long slog on the other side of this. So I think normally where it's a long slog and then you refresh for that finish to the season, this is going to be, well, I'm going to have to enjoy a little bit of myself right now because I know what's on the other side of this thing.
Speaking of enjoying themselves, Micah Parsons posted an Instagram video this evening of him, Edgerrin Cooper, and Nazir Stackhouse at what looked like Cooper's house because there were a couple of horses in the background. We know when Edgerrin Cooper first got to Green Bay last year that he bought a couple of horses, and that's why his nickname is Frosty, because he named one of his horses Frosty. So Micah Parsons already getting away, perhaps getting on a horse. I'm sure somewhere in his contract it says don't get on a horse, but Micah Parsons does what Micah Parsons wants.
Well, I'm sure Coop has those horses trained well to.
I'm sure he has plenty of time to train horses,
to not run.
Right.
Micah Parsons gets on the trot at most horse. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Did you ever ride a horse?
I have ridden a horse before. Yes.
Now horses have weight limits. Did you know that? Not that you have to worry about it. That was a dumb question.
The former name of our podcast was The Brick and the Stick because I was the stick. You thought I exceeded a weight limit for a horse? I mean, I'm 6'1.5", 175. I go to Planet Fitness 5 days a week. I eat well, so I'm not like this frail.
155 shredded.
Listen, I'm not you, big fella, but I'm not like an absolute stick. I've been naturally skinny my whole life. Take a hike. I think.
So these horses, these horses have weight.
Yeah, let's talk horses. That's what people want to hear about.
Listen, Edgerrin Cooper's horses probably are thoroughbreds, and they, because he's a big guy. He's around 250. Mike is over 250, and 250 has been the kind of weight limit. Every time I went horseback riding, how much do you weigh? I'm 250. It's really, yeah, okay. I'm a little over. How much? I'm about a biscuit over. Okay, well. This is what happens if you're too heavy on one of these horses and their hoof slips on a rock, you tear their ACL. So the whole time I'm riding this horse now, I'm scared. And I have to go because I got my girls with me. So dad can't all of a sudden punk out at the last minute because he's worried about a
'cause he's too
horse's
fat.
ACL going out. But I'm worried about this horse's ACL going out. Number one, because if the horse falls on me, I'm in trouble. And number two, I'm going to have to pay for this damn horse's surgery, or even worse, be taken to the glue factory.
Well, that's why we got this podcast, so you can pay for horse surgery. I think an underrated storyline that people can't forget about this week is the next time we see the Packers practice, to bring it back to football, Christian Watson's probably going to be on the field. Christian Watson told us, I think 2 weeks ago, shortly after he signed his 1-year extension, that he expected to practice when first eligible. Christian Watson is eligible as of today to come off the PUP list. 4 weeks have passed, but they have their bye week, so there's no need for the Packers to activate him now, because once you activate him, the Packers have 21 days, a 21-day window, to either sign him to the active roster, activate him to the 53-man roster, or end his season. So there's no point in activating him now when you can't see him practice to gauge where he's at.
Can I ask you a question about the rules then? Is there a minimum time that he has to spend practicing before he's allowed to be elevated?
No, he can be elevated whenever.
Okay. So it makes perfect sense to just wait and then you give yourself the longest runway before he actually gets to take off.
Correct. So there's no harm in not activating him until next Monday, or I should get the wording right. Designated to return is the accurate wording when he starts practicing. Activated is when he's added to the 53-man roster. From the date of designation to return, when he starts practicing, Packers have 21 days to add him to the 53. Or if those 21 days pass and they're like, he's not ready and won't be, they have to end his season. So you got that 3-week window. But best case scenario, Christian Watson did say recently that if it was the NFC Championship game, he would be playing, or at least feel comfortable playing, on that surgically repaired knee. We could see him on the field the next time the Packers play a football game against the Bengals in a little less than 2 weeks here in Green Bay. What would that do for this Packers offense, especially as they, continue without Jaden Reed?
Well, it gives them another guy to stretch the field. And what has really deterred them early on in this football season? Having too many men in the box. Right. It's been the run game and lack thereof. I tend to believe that most of the lack thereof is how teams are choosing to play them, with 8 in the box and a lot of people around the line of scrimmage. When Christian Watson's out there, not to say they don't respect Matthew Golden's speed, but he hasn't broken open a game yet. Until you break open a game, they're going to take their chances with you. And Rome's caught some big plays, but most of Rome's big plays are like 15, 20 yards crossing the middle of the football field. And Dontavian Wicks can stretch the field a little bit, but they haven't connected on that really in this football season yet. So bringing in a guy that is, speaking from a little bit of a thoroughbred, that can take it straight down the middle of the field and gain some safety's attention, that will do a lot to not just give Jordan Love a deep ball option, another deep ball option, but opens up the run game.
And that run game that got going, we've been talking about, the last couple weeks, as I look up a stat on Next Gen Stats that you made me think of. We talk about the last couple weeks needing to get teams to take a guy out of the box because Josh Jacobs faced so many stacked boxes. Entering week 4, he was second in the league in highest percentage of stacked boxes faced. I don't know the exact numbers from yesterday's game, but as we mentioned, he was able to break a couple. And, we saw the Josh Jacobs that we know Josh Jacobs can be late in that game. Pounding.
Did you know going into this Dallas game, like 80% of his yards came after contact? Yeah, he was getting hit at the line of scrimmage nearly every single play.
It was similar last year, where a heavy fraction, I don't have the numbers right in front of me since I didn't think I'd need that stat for this episode, but it was something like, I think he ranked like 33rd in yards before contact per rush, and then he ranked like 4th or 5th in yards after contact per rush in the league. So that can be seen a couple different ways, and you'd need to hook up Josh Jacobs and the O-lineman and coaches to a lie detector. That's either the O-line's not blocking well enough, or Jacobs isn't having great vision to see where the hole is. I think I know which one I'm thinking it is, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions, John Kuhn.
It's funny you talk about the run game and you talk about how statistically it's similar, but it doesn't look similar to last year. right? If he was getting hit at the line of scrimmage that much last year, it didn't feel like it. The run game took off
Right.
so much faster throughout that season, and most of it was out of necessity with Jordan Love being hurt. They stacked the box last year. Remember? Indianapolis, Tennessee, right? They stacked the box in those games that Jordan Love was not there. It didn't matter. This Packers team was still able to run the football. I am curious that when you go on the road, you try and simplify your run game. And I still saw a lot of motions, shifts, a lot of chicanery in the backfield with guys going left, right, and pulling and switching. And, I do wonder, does this offensive line, does this offense in general need that one go-to punch you in the mouth run that we know we can get 3 yards on? So far in this season, I would say yes, and I don't know what it is.
Before we wrap up here, I want to touch on that very briefly as we look into what's next for this team, especially with injuries on the offensive line. They can't block long enough. So I get that these motions and the deception and all the moving parts pre-snap are part of what can make this offense great. But sometimes it seems, and this is not an exact stat, but this is just from me watching every play of every game, it seems that there might be a couple too many moving parts, especially for a team that has had pre-snap penalties and still is missing on some of the little things. There was one play yesterday where there was moving parts left, moving parts right. Jordan Love's taking time back there. There's a horizontal handoff to maybe it was Savion Williams. Like, I get those are going to work every now and then, but is there something, John Kuhn, to maybe simplifying it a little bit, especially when Jordan Love may not have as much time back there with this offensive line nursing its way back to full health?
Yeah, I would say in general purposes, the time to unleash those are when you're at home, when you're comfortable, when you're because you're getting a normal operation into the huddle, out of the huddle. In case they were getting out of the huddle, they were breaking the huddle regularly between 10 and 12 seconds yesterday. That's too slow. You want to break the huddle at 20 seconds. So you have all that going on. Then you're hurrying up the process at the line of scrimmage. The timing gets thrown off by a hair here and there. So generally those plays, those 30% unscouted or the bells and whistle plays with a lot of motions and a lot of shifts, they have much better success at home. Dan Campbell even talked about that after the game, week 1 with the Packers. He said, hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with their offense. We have to truncate things when we come here, and their defense was very physical, and they punched us back too. We'll be just fine. And look at what they did. They have been just fine. 2 of their games at home. Have you seen what the Lions have done in the last few weeks? All of a sudden they're leading the NFL in scoring about 40 points a game over the last 3 weeks. And that's because, they took advantage of being home for 2 weeks, and their operation is much better, much smoother. And then they went down and beat the Ravens too, which is pretty crazy. But that's the thing, right? Sometimes, you push a little bit too much in there, and there might have been a little bit of game planning going on saying, well, this Dallas defense isn't that great. Going into the game, statistically, they were not. Even after the game, they're statistically still not. Maybe we can get away with doing a little bit more bells and whistles on the road here in Dallas against a defense like this than we can versus a team like Cleveland. So they chose to unleash it here in Dallas, and you find out it's still very difficult to do.
All right, before we get out of here and head into the bye week, John's going to go ride horses. I'm going to go watch the Yankees play the Red Sox in the wild card round at Yankee Stadium. With a couple words, I want you to fill in the blank. After 4 weeks, the Packers are blank.
After 4 weeks, the Packers are capable of making the Super Bowl. But will they? It all depends if they're able to make adjustments. And I mean that wholeheartedly, Matt. They're about 2 plays away from being undefeated. And yet, these last 2 games have showed us that the offense can struggle, and operationally, they might not be able to win a game if the offensive struggles.
How long is this blank? Fill in the blank is not... You should make fun of me for not being brief, John Kuhn.
I learned it from watching you. They're capable. They're capable of going to the Super Bowl still, even after these last 2 games.
My brief fill in the blank is the Packers are a playoff caliber team, but plenty still needs to be fixed before we consider them a legitimate Super Bowl contender again. We hope everyone has a great bye week. Thanks for listening and watching the Tundra.